Are you ready for an open discussion with the best of the best and the best of what's next? Welcome to the Tony DUrso Show. Join in on a great conversation today with some of the world's great influencers as they showcase great advice and techniques that made them the game changers they are today. Now, here's Tony DUrso.
Welcome. Thanks for joining in with us. Now, when we hear of the word soul, we may think a lot of things. It's well used and very common in our world today. And also the term chicken soup. We know that when everyone hears that. Hey, when one of my colleagues feels ill, I'm always recommending some special formula of chicken soup, which invariably helps heal the person a lot more quickly and makes them feel a lot better. Chicken soup is really important for the body, and it really helps, on international concerns as well. But that's a different story. Now, when you put them both together, wow, it's really powerful, as you're going to find out very soon. I consider this some of the best advice for you as an entrepreneur. This is your chicken soup. We're going to talk about your 10 keys to happiness with Amy Newmark. Now, the Chicken Soup for the Soul book series have sold more than 500 million copies worldwide. It's quite a few books. And so far on this show, we've interviewed 3 authors of this series, including the 2 original founders, Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen. And while we're at it, this is all about helping you and your friends turn your vision into reality. The whole goal here, the purpose, the reason is we want to help you get very successful at growing your business, taking your business to a high sustainable level. We'll meet Amy Newmark. She's editor and publisher of the Chicken Soup for the Soul book series. She personally edits every word of about 10 to 12 books a year. Here's some stats. In 2007, USA Today named Chicken Soup for the Soul one of the 5 most impactful books of the past 25 years. And in 2008, Chicken Soup for the Soul became the #1 best-selling trade paperback series of all time. I could say more, but I think that says it all. Let's get into it. Hi, Amy. Welcome to the Tony DUrso Show.
Thank you for having me on, Tony.
Amy, we're all looking forward to learning about your 10 keys to happiness. And what I'd like to know first is, how did it all happen for you? What's your backstory?
My backstory is not what you would expect for a Chicken Soup for the Soul person, because I spent many decades as a big bad Wall Street person, even being a short seller, which meant that I was telling people that when stocks were overvalued and I was exposing fraudulent stocks. But I spent my whole career in telecommunications and technology in the finance world. And then when I turned 50 and the youngest child was going off to college, my husband and I decided to do something completely different. And we bought Chicken Soup for the Soul from Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen, who you know. And I think I've tried to carry on their legacy of putting, real stories from real people in these books, because we learn best from the stories of other people. And I've tried to bring Chicken Soup for the Soul into the modern age by covering a lot more types of topics. And we also have expanded Chicken Soup for the Soul into pet food and also into a very large entertainment business, which owns Crackle, which used to be part of Sony. So it's a very big company now. And the book business, which started it all, continues to chug along like the little engine that could. But it's actually the smallest part now of the big Chicken Soup for the Soul enterprise.
Amy, can you take us a little bit more into it? You said it in a sentence, but why you went from finances, Wall Street, to publishing? What made you take such a move? Just tell us how that happened.
So this is going to sound incorrect somehow to people who think that Wall Street is populated by bad people, but I always was trying to do my best for people. So when I would come out with stock recommendations, it's because I was trying to help people make money. And when I would expose companies that were fraudulent, it was because I was trying to protect people from bad managements that were trying to take their money. So it was always about doing what was right for people. And this is really just an extension of that. They say that on Wall Street, there are only 2 emotions, fear and greed. And now I deal with, the whole panoply of emotions. But everything I always did was about storytelling. I mean, when I was on Wall Street, I was always telling stories. Here's a company. Here's why you should buy it. Here's a story about its history. Here's why this stock will help you. And it's the same thing now with Chicken Soup for the Soul. But I have to say that this is even more fulfilling than my prior business career was, because I get fan mail all the time from people specifically telling me how our books have helped them with their lives. And what I've done with this most recent book, Your 10 Keys to Happiness, is I've really distilled everything I've learned in the 14 years as editor of these books into one volume, where I've used that analytical side of myself to analyze the tens of thousands of Chicken Soup for the Soul stories that I've read and say, what have I learned from these? And what are the 10 most important keys to happiness? And so to me, it all seems like a logical progression, even though it might sound strange for somebody else that this Wall Street person became the Chicken Soup for the Soul lady. Oh, and you know what else? This is funny. When I was in college, I majored in Portuguese and minored in French. And there weren't enough Portuguese courses at my college. And so I spent a semester in Brazil. I wrote my thesis on popular poetry in Northeast Brazil. And there they tell stories through kind of chanting poetry. And so I was actually traveling around Brazil collecting stories from regular people. And that became the basis for my thesis. And when I sat down 30 years later to write a resume, when we started Chicken Soup for the Soul, all of a sudden I needed a resume. I realized, oh my gosh, I've come full circle, because I was collecting stories from regular people when I was 20, and then I was doing it again as a 50-year-old.
That's really interesting. You realized that you like telling stories, you need to tell stories, you want to tell stories, and here you are in charge of probably the biggest storytelling book in history, aside from perhaps the Bible, but that's debatable. We're
exactly.
not going to.
Yeah,
we're not going to go there.
Yeah, we are. I would say the most popular storyteller in the world, aside from the Bible. Absolutely.
And Amy, here we are, we're entrepreneurs. We want to learn from you. We want to get wisdom in terms of maybe we'll get some aha moments or some guidance to help take our business up. So we want to learn that. But also, I believe that these 10 key points that we're going to talk about here are going to be really helpful to entrepreneurs. So I'm going to ask you to start talking about the 10 points, and you're welcome to weave in a story or whatever on how you think this can help us in our business. All right.
So,
you ready for that? Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm absolutely ready for that. And I've been an entrepreneur for my whole life. Even when I was on Wall Street, I went out on my own and started my own research firm, and, was doing everything in the beginning and then hired a staff. But I know what it's like to be an entrepreneur. My father was an entrepreneur. My husband was and is an entrepreneur. So I've lived my whole life in the business world with entrepreneurs. So I use these strategies to help me be a happier person and to make me better at doing this work, running this business, because I don't think you can be good at running your business, which is hard. I mean, you're doing it, basically 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. Even when you're sleeping, you're probably dreaming about your business. You can't do that unless you have certain life tools. And what I think I've done is I've identified the tools that you really already have inside you. I'm just going to help you learn how to use them to become a happier, more productive person who gets more done each day and is happier about doing it.
Well said. I like that. That's a great intro for this. Now, we may or may not be able to get into all 10, but let's see what we can do. Let's start here from the beginning. Count your blessings.
All right. Yeah, let's start with that. And let me make the point that there's a lot of things you can't control in your life, especially these days. You got inflation and all kinds of things going on that affect your business, that affect how you operate your life. But you can control yourself. So what I'm really offering you is the chance to exert some control over the most important part of your enterprise, which is you, right? You are the key to everything. And whether that's at work or at home. So the first thing is, I don't think you can really be happy if you're not coming from a position of looking at what you have in your life instead of what you lack. I think that has been scientifically proven that people who are grateful, who actively, count their blessings, are more popular. They have better relationships with people. They're more productive. And some people are naturally grateful. They wake up knowing, hey, I'm blessed. This is good. Even if something bad happens to them, they're like, I bet there's going to be a silver lining, And then other people don't have that natural optimism. And the cool thing is there aren't that many personality traits that you can add on, but gratitude is one that you can actually add on. And it's really simple. And it takes you about 1 minute a day. And I think we can all afford 1 minute a day. Just sit down at night before you go to bed and write down one good thing that happened each day, or 1 or 3 good things that happened. If you write down 3 good things and you don't repeat any of them, at the end of a month, you're going to have written down 90 things that you're grateful for. And it can be as minor as, I was running late and I, found a parking space right in front of where I was going. Or it could be something major, like I'm so blessed to have children who call me all the time and are still part of my life, whatever it is. But I just don't believe you can be happy if you're not actively practicing gratitude. So that's one that I think is key. And then my second key, and then all the other ones are optional. Or do you want to talk about gratitude some more?
Well, we'll take them one at a time. I did want to say, because throughout my entire career corporately and as an entrepreneur, which would be 10 years as a paper route boy, I never, ever was grateful for anything. I wasn't an ingrate. I'm a people person. I'm Italian. So, I'm already born liking people, but I never specifically, purposely counted my blessings or made a purposeful act to be grateful. I didn't understand it until I became an entrepreneur later and actually started podcasting, when I've met great people such as you, elite entrepreneurs, as I call you all. And I was taught how to be grateful. I was taught gratitude. And the more I understand it, the more I'm grateful, the better everything goes. And it almost sounds a little thiedy-weedy or whatever people may call it, but it really works. The more grateful I am, the more that there is to be grateful for. It really is that powerful.
It changes each day for you, because if you know that at night you're going to write down 3 things that you're grateful for, you're going to conduct yourself differently during the day, because you're going to be looking for the items that are going to go on your list that night. And so you're going to be open to seeing all the good things that are happening, and how somebody was nice to you, somebody let you pull in front of them when you were driving, whatever it was. So it does change your perspective. We don't all need that, but for people who do need it, 1 minute every night is all it takes to change that personality trait.
We're talking about your 10 Keys to Happiness with Amy Newmark, and you can find her and the book at chickensoup.com. It's just that simple, chickensoup.com. We're talking about the 10 Keys to Happiness that Amy has written, based on, if I'm getting this right, basically a collection or understanding, this kind of organizing, let me call it an overwhelm of great stories, and you've distilled it down into these 10 key points. Do I have that right?
You do. And in the book, what I do is I present to you each of the keys to happiness, and then I give you 10 stories that will show you role models who are actually living the life and showing you how to use each of those keys to happiness.
Excellent. Let's take on the next one. Free yourself with forgiveness.
All right. We all have lives that have been filled with resentments, disappointments, people who have done us wrong, people who hurt our feelings. And you can collect all of those and carry them around with you. You could imagine that you're wearing a cloak and you've sewn onto that cloak a little piece of metal for every one of those disappointments. And so you're dragging all of those behind you as you're trying to move forward in your life. Or you could shrug off that cloak and you could leave those things behind you in the past, because that's where they belong. They belong in your past. You shouldn't be dragging them into your present or into your future. And this is something that can really hurt you when you're trying to operate a business, because things always go wrong. And there are always going to be people who let you down or do mean things to you or whatever it is. Well, there's a story I started the chapter with by a woman who was divorced and couldn't stop talking about her ex-husband and how he had wronged her. And finally, her best friend said to her, you might as well still be married to the man. You take him with you wherever you go. And it was such an epiphany for this woman, because she realized, oh my gosh, I've created this prison with my resentment, and then I've locked myself inside it. My ex-husband is going along happily with his life, and I'm stuck here in the past. And she said, I'm not letting him into my headspace anymore. I'm going to stop reliving those emotions. So I didn't really know what the word forgive meant until a few years ago. I thought it somehow meant that you were saying to somebody, oh, don't worry about it. What you did wasn't so bad. That somehow you were, saying it was okay, almost condoning it. That's not what forgiveness means. What forgiveness means is that you've just decided that you will not relive the negative emotions associated with that thing that happened. So you intellectually know that thing happened, that person ripped me off, whatever it was, but you've decided, I'm not going to react to it anymore. I will intellectually know that it happened, but I will not keep reliving those emotions, because if I do that, I'm just letting that person control my life. So this is a change that you can make in your perspective in 1 second, just by realizing, whoops, I've been letting that person inside my head all this time. Out of my head now, person, out of my head now, that incident. I will not relive those emotions. I had those emotions when it happened. Why would I keep allowing them to happen over and over again? So I think that's another key to happiness. And it's really important when you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to move forward and bad things keep happening. You got to just leave those bad things behind you and keep pressing forward.
Amy, if you know any other way to do that, or if anyone in the audience, please let me know. I've known people like this, and no matter what, they won't let go. I've known someone who just out of the blue would start yelling at me, but not that the problem was with me, but the problem was with someone else that wronged this person, and just start yelling and going off about something that happened years ago. And I'm like, what happened? Did the person just call you, email you? No, the person just remembered this grievance. It was like, it was so many years ago. But somehow, sometimes just pointing it out to people, they either like doing it or they can't stop doing it, and they can't get it out of their system even when you point it out. So if you or anyone knows any other way to recognizing it is good, but sometimes people need a little bit more to get it out of their system, I think.
I have another method, and this is what I do, and it might seem a little snarky, but I mean, I remember when I was in my mid-30s, I helped take a company public. I was doing it as a consultant to a brokerage firm. So we did the IPO of this company, and it did well for a while, the stock, and then something happened and the stock went down. And I was at this brokerage firm, and they were the ones who decided to take this company public. It wasn't my decision. I just came in as a consultant and helped them do this IPO. And the head of trading started screaming at me. His name was Louis. And Louis started screaming at me in this conference room that was filled with probably 50 traders. And he's screaming at me about this stock that's gone down. And I just stood there and I looked at him and I thought, wow, you are a pathetic little man. I am so glad I'm not you. I don't know what's wrong with you, but I'm not letting it touch me. And I just built this invisible wall in front of me, and his words just kept flying over and never could touch me. Now, somebody might say, well, then you're kind of having a little bit of like a superiority thing when you use that as your defense mechanism. But it totally worked for me. I mean, I just viewed him as a specimen, basically, and didn't allow him to hurt me. And here's the really funny part. Years later, I was leaving a company that I had been working at, and I was starting to get a bunch of really good job offers. And one of the offers I got was from somebody who asked me if I wanted to come in as vice chairman of the brokerage firm where that guy was the head trader. And I almost took the job because I thought, oh, I can go fire him now. But it wasn't really because I was suffering. I was just intellectually thinking, he probably needs to be fired. I could take this job and go in and get him fired now. But I didn't do it because even though that would have been an excellent version of revenge just served cold, I wasn't really interested in the job.
So I have to ask you the question, Amy, you forgave him?
Oh, instantly. As he was yelling, he wasn't hurting me. I mean, that there's something called pre-forgiveness where you just decide right up front, this isn't even going to touch me. You know, you could be hurt by something and then get over it later, or you could not even let it hurt you in the first place. And what I do with pre-forgiveness is I just look at the person who's done this thing to me or who is yelling at me or whatever, and I think, what is it in your life that is bothering you so much that you're acting like this? You know, and I just analyze the person right up front. And if you do that, then you don't even have to experience any hurt at all. And that's a really good thing to do in business because you're going to be dealing with people all day long who are in some way letting you down or agitating or causing problems for you. And so it's really good if you can just go in up front and think, all right, I'm very lucky I'm not this person. And let me try to figure out why this person is acting this way. And then when you start analyzing them and viewing them kind of as a specimen under your magnifying glass, they can't really bother you.
I like that. Great. Thank you so much for the additional insights and information on that. That's very good. All right, let's go to the next one, which sounds like, don't we hear this all the time, but I'm sure you've got a story for it. It's called Help Someone Else.
So when we help someone, it releases dopamines and you just get this little rush of feeling good. And I think we all can think about the time when we put a quarter in the parking meter for a stranger, like we saw the cop coming and we're like, oh, this person who's parked right next to me, I'll just stick a quarter in there, right? Or you held the door open for somebody, even though it delayed you a bit. Whatever it is, you get that little burst of pleasure from doing that. And often therapists will prescribe volunteer work for people who are clinically depressed because it will really help them to find value in their lives and realize they're contributing members of society and that they're worthy. And so it can be something really minor. Like there's a story in the book from a woman who said that her friend was depressed and just wasn't doing well. And she knew that a lady who was at the church that they both went to for some reason didn't have a car available and needed a ride to the grocery store. So she suggested to her a depressed friend, could you please give so-and-so a ride to the grocery store? And so her depressed friend gave this lady a ride to the grocery store and discovered that she really enjoyed helping her. Then she gave her rides to some of her other errands, and it just transformed this lady. She felt so much better about herself. And I have read thousands of Chicken Soup for the Soul stories about volunteer work, or even just holding a door open, whatever it is, it really helps to make you feel better. So if you're having a bad day, just go say, I'm going to go do something nice for somebody. And it really could be as simple as holding the door open for somebody. And you'll see, it will make you feel better.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I don't mention it on this show at all, but for over 5 years, actually, I think I mentioned it once. For over 5 years, we've been helping orphans, widows, and the elderly, people that just need a little help. And we've been feeding them, paid for some insulin. I helped admit someone to the hospital that needed to pay the fees, just all sorts of things like that. And we've been doing it for probably going on 6 years now. And it just feels really good to help as we can. It's more than the starfish story, you know, where you help one person, you make a difference. We're just trying to help where we can because, you know, I've got everything I need. I've got all the food I want. I've got gasoline in the cars. The family's happy. Let's help other people. And you're right. It just feels good when you do it. No one's making me do it. I do it because I love it, because I enjoy it. And it's such a good feeling. And out there, dear entrepreneur, if you're, take a look at that. Help, even if you're struggling, let's use that's a bad word, to make things happen. When you find it, you help people, you'll struggle less and less, and you'll get helped more. And I think that's part of it, is not that we do it for a reward, but we wind up being rewarded with, I think, more business and more goodness around us.
A lot of companies will have what they'll call a team building day, where they go out and they, I don't know, pick up debris at the beach, or weed a certain part of their town, or engage in some kind of volunteer work as a group. And it just lifts everyone's spirits. It's not just team building. They're giving everybody their own little dose of dopamine to take home with them.
Exactly. Amy, this next one, I see that you've practiced well. For those that are seeing the video, if you look at Amy's desk, you'll find it's clean. And this point is have less stuff.
Oh my gosh, I have so learned this lesson. So my husband and I moved 6 months ago after living in the same house for 25 years. And it wasn't just my stuff, it was the kids' stuff too, because when you have kids who are in their 30s and you haven't forced them to get their stuff out yet, oh boy, do they use you as a storage unit. But anyway, I've read thousands of Chicken Soup for the Soul stories about people who changed their lives just by getting rid of stuff, because having stuff is such an emotional weight. And the worst thing you can do is get a storage unit. I mean, just ask people who have storage units, what did you do with the stuff in your storage unit? And they'll be like, well, I paid the fees for 5 years and then I threw it all away. I mean, so just don't put it in the storage unit in the first place. I have a story in the book from a guy who had done that thing. You're supposed to put aside what you're going to give away, what you're going to throw away, what you're going to donate to charities, and then what you're going to put in storage. And then he took all the stuff that was supposed to go to the storage unit, because he was moving from a house to a 1-bedroom apartment. All the stuff that was supposed to go into the storage unit, got rid of it. And a year later, he's in his 1-bedroom apartment, happy as a clam. He couldn't even remember anymore what was supposed to have gone into the storage unit. So I have a bunch of stories in the book that I think provide us with really good role models for the value of getting rid of stuff. And, if you're having trouble forcing yourself to do it, 2 pieces of advice. 1, break it into tiny little pieces, like do 1 drawer, 1 shelf, do 1 drawer 1 week, do 1 shelf the next week, just do 1 small, easy bite each week. The other thing, and this works for me, is give stuff away and realize that by holding on to it, you're holding on to what could be a blessing for someone else. That extra blender that you're holding on to in case one of your kids ever wants it, your kid isn't going to want it. They want to just get their own blender. But that could go to your local Goodwill, or to some house where they have people who are just starting out, or to some place that gives stuff to people who've just lost everything in a fire, or whatever it is. You're holding on to someone else's blessing when you hoard all of that stuff. My husband and I gave each other tours of our closets a few weeks ago, because we were so excited because we got rid of half our clothing. And we were showing each other the emptiness in our closets and how nice it was to just look in there and only see clothing that we actually want to wear.
We need to do that again. For the past 30 years and counting, my wife and I are probably the biggest contributor to Salvation Army. Folks, if you got a lot of stuff, I advise, this is what I do. We don't bother selling it. We just give it to people that we feel can enjoy it and do something with it, as Amy suggests. And there again, I think there comes a little bit of the dopamine here, because you're helping other people now enjoy your stuff. Yeah, I like that idea of going through a drawer or part of the closet, or a little bit at a time, and see what you really don't need, because it's just clutter. And we keep giving it away, and I don't know how it happens, but we keep growing. So I think we're forced to keep giving it away, because it duplicates, it multiplies.
So the other thing is, you need to do it at your office too. So we came back to work in the office in March after having been gone for 2 years. And the first thing I did when I got back was I cleaned out my office. I threw away so much stuff that I've been holding on to, because after being away for 2 years, I realized I don't need any of this stuff. I've been perfectly fine without it for 2 years. So I have a much cleaner office now, as you have noted. And it makes me really happy to have a clean, empty house and a nice, clean, empty office too.
And by the way, your office is more clean than the first time we chatted when I had a peek of your office. Not that it was particularly messy, but it actually looks more, there's something about an open space. And I'm not quite sure what it is exactly, but it just has a good feeling. So very good.
I think an open space, when you sit down at a desk and it's open, I think it really helps you to move forward, because it's like the prairie in front of you. It's wide open. All the possibilities are open in front of you. There's something symbolic about it.
Exactly. Now, this next point we've all heard 52,000 times, and I'll be the first to raise my hand. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know how to do it. It's 2 words. It sounds easy. Think positive. But it's not as easy. It's like some of these other points, not necessarily as easy as you think by just saying it. It takes some application. Perhaps you can help us with that, Amy. Think positive.
So what I've done in this chapter is I've collected 10 different stories that illustrate 10 different ways that you can use positive thinking. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So one of them, and this is going to sound so like what people think of, if they think that chicken soup for the soul is just all sweet and nice, which we're not. We're actually very practical, and we're giving you tips that will actually work because we're very businesslike. But this is going to sound like one of those sweet, trickly kind of tips, but that is to smile. So it doesn't really matter what kind of day you're having. Maybe you're having the worst day ever. But if you emerge from your office or your home and you smile at people, they will smile back at you, and it will change the way that people interact with you during the day. And I had a story in there from a woman who went to the post office, and there was a really long line, and she was going to be late to her next appointment, and she was stomping her way back to her car in the parking lot, all bitter and tense. And then she saw this woman stomping towards her with this drawn face. And then she thought, oh my gosh, is that what I look like to everybody? And so she smiled at the woman, and the woman kind of startled, and then her shoulders visibly relaxed, and then she smiled back. And this woman realized, wow, I can change how everybody interacts with me today by smiling. And so she spent the rest of the day just smiling at people. And it really works. I mean, I had an experience in New York a couple of years ago. I was in a car and trying to get to a hotel on West 44th Street. So I'm going up 6th Avenue, and there was a fender bender right at the entrance to West 44th Street. And so the cops had completely barricaded off the whole street, even though it would have been easy to let people still go through in one lane of the 4 that were there. But they had barricaded the whole thing off. And so the driver of the car I was in, he was just going to keep going. And I said, no, pull over, because let me get out at least, and I'll take these 2 suitcases I have and wheel them down the block to the hotel. But we pulled over, and I leaned out the window to the police officer, and I said, hi, you must be having a very bad day. I was just wondering, could we just pull up here for a moment? I have 2 suitcases in the back. I need to get them out of the trunk, and then I'll wheel them down to the Harvard Club is where I was going, down there on the left. And would that be okay with you? And he goes, lady, with that smile, I'm going to let you drive down there. He pulled all the traffic cones out, let us pull down the road. And I looked in the back window, and he put all the traffic cones back after we got through. But that was the power of a smile, with a hassled cop, in Manhattan. It really works. So that's one of the tips that's in our Think Positive chapter. Another story I put in there that I thought was good was by Nick Walker. Nick Walker is the weather dude. You might have seen him on CNN being like a national weatherman. Now he's doing other stuff. But Nick kept all the rejection letters he ever got. And so he had, decades worth of rejection letters, applying for a newsman position at this TV station and being rejected, and then going to another one. And he looked through all of his rejection letters and realized that every single one, of course, represented a door that closed. But then he said, but wait, right after that, a door opened. And then I got that job at that other TV station, or it was even a better job. And he realized that every door that closed, there was another door that opened right away. And this falls into the category of remember that there really is always a silver lining. And I'm telling you all of this stuff, even though I have a cancer that is currently incurable and I'm going to have it for the rest of my life. And I'm using all of these tips in your 10 Keys to Happiness, and I'm doing great. This stuff really, truly works. And one of the reasons I put this book together now is because I am concerned about my legacy. And I wanted to take what I had learned in the 14 years I've been doing this and distill it into this one volume. So I've got 10 different ways in this book that you can learn how to use positive thinking. So go for it.
Amy, I'm sorry to hear that, and not to be silly or whatever, but I believe that by you're using chicken soup for the soul, you're going to definitely heal better and or deal with it better. I just know that part of that is being positive. I've lost some family members and close friends to cancer. I'm very aware of that and what it can do. But I also know that when we address things from a bigger perspective, as perhaps you're learning with Chicken Soup of the Soul, it just makes things easier to deal with. I hope I'm saying that in the right way.
Oh, totally. Okay. No, I went to see a psychiatrist at Sloan Kettering because the oncologist, like routinely says, oh, go talk to somebody. So I went to see the psychiatrist, and she started out by saying to me, is there anything you're grateful for? Well, I went on for 20 minutes without stopping about all the things I was grateful for. So that was, tip number 1 in our Keys to Happiness. Then she said, do you have any unresolved issues with anybody? Well, that tip number 2, free yourself with forgiveness. So I told her about my lack of unresolved issues with everybody. And I think by then we were pretty much at the 50-minute mark of our hour. And she said, you know what? You're good to go. You don't ever have to come back. And I said to her, it's chicken soup for the soul. It's what I've learned in all these years of reading these stories. This stuff, it just really, really works. And that's one of the things I try to impress upon people. I'm not some touchy-feely person. I'm a New Yorker, very practical. I only like things that work. And that's what I've done here. I'm really trying to present you with things that work and that have all worked for me.
I love it. And I do appreciate you sharing that with us. Next one is probably a little bit in line with that, which is make me time. Yeah. I didn't say it right. It's make me time.
Yeah, you're right. It's make me time. So it's not selfish. And, those of us who are busy and always doing for other people, we always put ourselves last on our to-do list. And I've learned, and I've certainly seen it in the thousands of stories I've read about me time, how essential it is that you do carve out some time for yourself each day or each week. Now, it could be 5 hours a week when you're going to go horseback riding, or it could be 30 minutes a day that you're going to read and nobody can bother you. It might just be right before you go to bed. You might be tired and still decide, I'm going to read for half an hour before I go to sleep. It could be taking a walk outside in nature. It could be meditating. Not that I meditate because I always want to be doing something. I asked somebody one time, can I walk while I'm meditating? And they said, no. I said, well, I'm not doing it then. But anyway, I've got a bunch of stories in here from people who talk about how carving out that me time really did improve their lives. And you know what? What happens is you become less resentful of the work that's taking your time. You become less resentful of all of your responsibilities as somebody who works, as a parent, a grown child, a spouse, a friend, colleague, whatever it is. If you carve out a little time for yourself, you'll be better prepared. And this is something that you can just put on your calendar. We had a story from a woman who was a very successful salesperson, and her calendar was 100% filled with sales meetings. She had no time for herself. And she was so successful that it was ruining her life and she was going to quit her job. And then her mentor said to her, "You don't have any lily pads on your calendar." And she said, "What is a lily pad?" And her mentor said, "Well, you know how a frog jumps onto a lily pad and basks in the sun and relaxes a little bit? You need those on your calendar. So put some fake appointments on your calendar and those will be your lily pads." So that's what this woman did. And she continued in her job as a result.
I like that. This next one, Amy, is something all of us entrepreneurs know only too well. And I can't wait to hear what the stories are for it. And it's called, the title is Step Outside Your Comfort Zone.
Yeah. So I think that we all do that. I mean, my favorite quote is from John Shedd. It was something like, ships are safe in harbor, but that is not what ships are built for, right? Get out of the harbor, get out there, be that seafaring person. So I have my own story in this chapter. It's about how when I turned 50, I realized, my life is accidentally getting narrower. I'm going to start doing new things, even things that scare me, and I'm going to push myself. Now, I guess buying chicken soup for the soul when I turned 50 and then facing the worst recession in US history since the Great Depression and watching Borders go out of business, et cetera. I guess that was a big step outside your comfort zone. But I think that was more a result of stupidity than anything else. It wasn't that I was really trying so hard to push myself. That was just a bad move, but we survived it. So that's what matters. But I've really tried to do new things. Now, doing new things could be as simple as shopping at a different grocery store where you don't know what's in all the aisles, right? Just expand your brain a little bit. Try a new food. You know, you've heard people talking about Wordle. Go try it yourself. You know, whatever it is. My story is about the ultimate in stepping outside my comfort zone because I ran off a 1,000-foot cliff in Oman and paraglided down to the beach. So I have a story in there about that. And it was scarier than I expected it to be because I made a big blunder, and a surprising blunder for somebody who's supposed to be good at words. I somehow thought that paragliding involved more like a hang glider, like some fixed wing thing, you know, and that sounded aerodynamically like it would work. And I personally would never jump out of an airplane because I would be afraid the parachute would somehow not fill up with air and the cords would all get tangled among each other. Well, I got to the top of the cliff and they're putting the harness on me and I looked behind me. Lying on the ground behind me was not a hang glider. It was a parachute with a million strings coming out of it. And I thought, oh, I am such an idiot. Paragliding, parachute. And then the guy said to me, here's the most important thing. You must run off the cliff. But the parachute's lying there on the ground like an inert piece of fabric, you know. Luckily, I was like hooked up to this big guy, you know, my guide. So I'm hooked up to him. So he's going to run off the cliff. So I have to run off the cliff too, you know, and I probably looked like one of those cartoon characters. I don't even know if my feet were touching the ground because he was so tall and I'm so short. But anyway, we ran off the cliff and the parachute did fill with air and we did not plummet to our deaths. But I wrote about that. But basically, after doing that, I feel like I can do just about anything.
I love that story. I don't know what else to say about that. I grow white just thinking about that.
I won't do it again, but I have to say that when you step outside your comfort zone, and maybe you're accustomed to doing it at work and then you become very staid in the rest of your life, but basically force yourself to do those things that you're uncertain about, and you will feel so empowered and so reinvigorated and energized. And you know what? Even if you think you're, you know, the most, you know, amazing entrepreneur, always trying new things, well, think about your home life. Are you set in your ways at home? Maybe you need to shake that up also. The more you shake things up, the better off you are.
Amy, I'm that type of person that when I hear words or watch anything, I feel this association like it happens to me. So just hearing that story from you, this is just the way I am. My palms are all sweaty and I literally feel all the blood has drained from my face and I'm trying to pump myself up. It just has that kind of effect when I hear this. It's like, That's quite something. And here you are, chicken soup of the soul. You're buying it. It just kind of shows that devil may care, if I'm saying that right, that attitude of just go out there and wing it, which us entrepreneurs love to do, really can help us meet new successes that we would not have met otherwise.
You just have to have a lot of faith. I mean, you have to have faith that things will work out, that people will do stuff for you, that you can get people to do stuff for you. There's a story in the Think Positive chapter that I didn't mention to you, but this woman, Lori Davis, had a formative event occur when she was in first grade. She was afraid to go out to recess because she didn't know how to do something that all the other kids knew how to do. I forget what it was, skipping or whatever it was. And this fifth grade teacher found this first grader hiding in the hallway, not willing to go out to recess. And the fifth grade teacher said to her, "You walk out onto that playground like you own it." She walked out like she owned the playground. These boys asked her if she would be Wonder Woman in their game, and she got to be Wonder Woman. And she has conducted the rest of her life that way. This has been going on for decades now. She always walks out onto that playground like she owns it, and it has helped her so much in her career because, they say fake it till you make it. It totally works. It absolutely works.
I love it. Amy, I conducted this interview today to get more and savor more the stories and understand in more in depth, drill down in each point, as opposed to running through them. And I absolutely love the stories that we've told. And our time is now come. So what I'm going to say to everyone, there's more stories. There's 90 something more stories to talk about. We didn't get to them all. I'm really sorry. We'll have to do a series on this. But if you go to chickensoup.com, you can get the book. We talked about your 10 Keys to Happiness with Amy Newmark. I really, truly love those stories. My palms are still sweaty. Amy, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Tony. It was a lot of fun.
Hey, thanks for hanging out with me while I featured an elite entrepreneur who took her vision to reality. We discussed Your 10 Keys to Happiness with Amy Newmark. She's the editor and publisher of the most prolific book series in the world, Chicken Soup for the Soul series. And she gave us stories and talked about some of the 10 points that she has in her book. We talked about count your blessings, free yourself with forgiveness, helping someone else, having less stuff, think positive, make me time, and step outside your comfort zone. Really some good stories there. I absolutely love it. I like to know, what did we discuss that resonated with you? And while we're at it, what's your story? Please let us know. And if you have any Apple device, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps the show. And we really love to hear from you. And it's a review that tells us you're hearing it and that we're providing and giving you what you like and what is helpful. So please give us that review. And this is really important. I know I ask you about this a lot. Please share this with a few friends. And you know why? Because it's friends helping friends that get us through this madness and everything else that's going on. We have to kind of stick together and help each other. All right, let's use this and let's help you move on your journey to success. Thanks, and remember, just take action. Success awaits those who persevere and remain steadfast despite the odds. Sow good seeds, do good deeds, and join me on the next episode of The Tony DUrso Show.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's edition of the Tony DUrso Show with his key influencers. Be sure to tune in again next Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Influencers channel.